Good morning. It's always advantageous to speak at the beginning. And then speaking assignment is little different than, team assignments, what we do in organizations. Because before even you speak, you get a bouquet. So, it's just like, but then it also means it sets expectation, right? So I'm sure many of you have a lot of experience in terms of leading project teams. So when you get inside the organization and you are given a very, very challenging project, that's also is built in. So I have exactly 45 minutes to talk about a topic which you can, I guess, even 45 days, we can continue to talk about this, whether you require a great idea or great team. So within this 45 minutes, I'll try to build in and my way of understanding. When Mahesh asked me to actually speak on this topic, I kind of started realizing, and mostly I use my own experience and my understanding about my 2 decades of experience. And also, as I said, I met one of my colleagues, Shovit, who is attending the program, and I was telling, and this apology to all those who don't come from IT industry, because I have about 24 years experience in human resource development, and out of that, about 17 years in IT. So I'm very biased. So my apology. Whatever I'm going to talk, lot to take from IT. I have just a little bit from non-IT, but that's more of, in a sense of, how do we talk about manage teams, manage or build great teams. So let me start I think we must first set the context. We are talking about being successful in knowledge economy, right? And for that you need great team or great ideas, right? So let me start my proposition from defining what I thought knowledge economy is doing, because my entire presentation is based on that assumption. And I started looking as I was telling, I was just thinking, what is knowledge economy doing, which has an impact generally on both teams? How do you form teams? And how do you form ideas? And when I talk about that in knowledge economy, so I thought, let me just start with that thoughts. I think a couple of things is happening, and I'll talk about the 3 trends, which is my own observation. You may or disagree, but let me just put my proposition. I thought what knowledge economy is doing, the shifting of value from access to understanding and perspective. Before knowledge economy, all that you had is how do you get an access? And when I'm saying, somebody might say, oh, this is a typical management jargon, and therefore, as you can see, the example I'll give about Samsung. Many of you would know, but this has been a very famous case study, how Samsung built their TV, the flat screen LED, LCD TVs, right? And of course, the thing is LED is the thing. Earlier we started with LCD, then LED, right? TVs. What is that made Samsung have this breakthrough? Because when Samsung was kind of looking at the revolution of TV, and all over the world, everybody is trying to get, right, Sony, and everybody was concentrating on, how bright is the picture, how many features you can add, very, very common to IT product development, right? So I am offering this feature. This is what is happening. Sharper thing, sharper picture, right? You can do so many things. Where the people, to cut the long story short, what did the Samsung guys did? They were observing in United States, the people when they shift the house or they renovate their house, they realize the TV is no more a source of entertainment. The decision for buying TV, even in United States, is with the housewives. And the housewives see those TVs as a part of the whole design of your drawing room or a bedroom. And they were the first to understand, and that's what I call it, understanding and perspective. Where everybody else was talking about the feature, they talked about the flat screen, and all this, the design purely from perspective of using TV as like a sofa set or a teapot or a dressing table or something which is next to your bed. And then, rest is history. You started having TV which is hung on the wall. It's the interior designer who started talking, and if you go to an interior designer, right? I have been talking, I'm getting into a new flat, and I'm talking, and the first thing he said, where you are going to keep the TV? Right? It's a part of interior design. Now, many years back, the Samsung folks understood this. Is it not a breakthrough thinking? A breakthrough idea? Yes or no? Okay. Many stories, many case studies, enough has been written, but I'll just talk about what I have seen as a theme. And I thought what knowledge economy is doing, they are transforming information to wisdom. A lot of people know the people who started Google, they started realizing because both of them came from a research family. And those of you who have done research, you know one of the things is to take references. And when you do references, when my time and I did my doctoral program, I didn't have Google. I had to go to the library to write down. Very painful process. Right? And they started giving information to people because that's where the business idea came. That search is a big business and it's given to you free of cost. And rest is history, right? With the company, none of us pay for the search, but they earn billions of dollars because they knew they can capture people's mind. And that's the best way of providing information. I was talking to my cousin. I don't know how many of you remember, when he was a student in IIT Kharagpur, I used to live in Calcutta and he used to come to my home. And he was telling me a couple of days back, I went to Calcutta to speak in one of the forums of Times of India. So I met him after a long time and he was telling, do you remember? I used to come to your home and we used to go and walk past a Hajra Road. There is a place called Hajra Road Junction where people will cook noodles to feed you. Free of cost. Because Indian housewife ever never thought about noodles. And noodles then created a history. Right? Convenience. So similarly, I think it is no more information. The value is shifting purely from information. That's what Google did. But that's what they don't get their dollars from. They give you information, they capture your mind. And that's how they have built in one of the most profitable billion-dollar ventures. The third trend. Again, often repeated, tons of books have written, and as you can make out, I'm a great fan of Apple, so I'm a great fan of Steve Jobs' leadership. And I'm sure many of you, there are tons of books, at least I have read at least 7 books recently, which has come up, including his biography. What does it say? To me, I say it in simple terms, Steve Jobs is a guy, if you see from his early days, you go to blogs, you go to YouTube, right? And you just type Steve Jobs and then things will come, including some of his photographs where he had hairs, long hairs, when he was looking young, and he was thinking about the Macintosh and the design. And if you go there, you will realize one thing is very consistent. He is a tech creator. Whatever you might say, Samsung has, I don't want to get into that. Samsung is a great company, is doing great. But have they created anything? There's so many technologies. This guy went on creating. So I call it tech creators and critical thinkers. He has always challenged. I have a friend in US who works with my team, my colleague in Santa Clara. He used to work for Nokia. Long time. And he told me the story. I don't know how many of you know that initially when they were developing the phone, Apple went into a collaboration with Nokia. And as it happens with many of us, that's a problem with us and individual and organization. When you think you have known everything, that's where your fall starts. Because after 6 months, Nokia started telling, you want to teach us phone? Give me a break. And they broke. And a colleague of mine actually worked for Nokia in Santa Clara. So he's seen it, the relationship breaking away. And he called the people and told the developers, I want everything to be done in one click. And as usual, the developers have said, it's not possible. He said, I don't care. But that's what my customer cared. Can you create it? One touch. So I think knowledge economy has again shifted value from technologies to take creators and critical thinkers. So you need to think of these 3 trends. I thought there could be many, but that's what I looked at it. And therefore I built my proposition. And the proposition is very simple. If you look at all this, what does it say? God has given us both, right? What God has given, and most of you are good project managers, you should have both in very, very good quantity to be successful. Left brain and right brain. And Daniel Pink, who is one of my favorite authors, has written this book. It's almost 4 years back. He said 20th century is only going to be the left brain people. 21st century is going to be for the right brain people. And the book is called Right Brain Will Prevail. And he talks about case studies where people from Yale Medical College were trained in art appreciation course. And afterwards they were found their efficiency has increased by 25%. Those of you who are interested, read the book. Fabulous book. Daniel Pink, The Right Brain Will Prevail. So my point is, if you see this trend, and that's what I'm trying to tell, it's not only the great idea. I believe great ideas can come only from a holistic perspective. 21st century is no more left brain. I'm sorry to say that. 21st century is going to be left and right brain put together. And as I always say, God has the biggest wisdom, and that's why He has given us both. The only problem is we have not been using it. I've been working with product companies for long, including my initial stint as working with a startup for Sasken. And a lot of people ask me why in India product companies don't come. I mean, in fact, halfway through one of my articles, it says why Facebook is not born out of the backlands of Basavangudi. And hopefully it will get published soon. So my thought is we have not been able to integrate the left and right brain. That's the simple reason. And that's what 21st century requires, and that's what you require to succeed in knowledge economy. So, this is my favorite slide. Please use both. It's no more the question of, and as I often say this, if the right me has left me, then can my left me be right? I repeat, if the right me has left me, then can my left be right? It is not either or proposition. So great ideas, as I have shown in case of Samsung, as I have shown in case of Google, in the case of Steve Jobs' leadership, and I'm very careful, I've said Google led by Steve Jobs. We have to see how the organization performs after Steve Jobs. Obviously, it will either prove or disapprove a lot of things about leadership in 21st century. So let's watch, right? So I don't want to say, but only thing I can say, therefore, the ideas which should come and take both. So therefore, my second proposition is, great ideas can come only from a holistic perspective. So what does it mean? You need a diverse thinking. Recent 2020 has proved that. Gone are the days of superstar Dhonis. It's the lowly rated West Indian team, known more for their dances than cricket. We lost only one game and we are out of 2020. Right? So it has to come from diverse thinking. And how do you get diverse thinking? You have a great team. And therefore, when I go, I have my third proposition. All that I'm talking about Indian context. And for last few years, though I work for an American multinational, most of my life work for in India. With a caution, I always say this, right? I don't say that, West is West and Rudyard Kipling has said that, right? West is West and East is East. Thou shalt not never meet. I don't believe in that proposition. Please don't misunderstand me. I believe you need to create a third paradigm, which comes out of the wisdom from West as well as East, which is very characteristic. And therefore, I'll talk about Indian context. So let me give you some specific research data and what the culture says. So I'm telling you need to have holistic ideas, and therefore holistic ideas can only come when you use your both left brain and right brain, and rightfully so it has to come from teams. And great teams are those which has people who have strong left brain, people who have strong right brain, and somebody like Steve Jobs possibly who have both. Very strong. I'm being a little pragmatic, so please, my apologies, because to have both left and right brain using is a very different ball game altogether, right? So, and it has a culture. And I'm talking about Indian culture. And the shortest definition, which my software friends likes, it's by Earl Hofstede, as you know, the Dutch behavioral scientist, whose model is still alive. He did a study in IBM many years back with a mammoth sample size of 144,000 people spread over 37 countries in the world, and came out his model of culture. He said, culture is programming of mind. Would you agree? Yes, no? Okay, so if this is programming of mind, let me quickly give you some data point. I personally believe, contrary to the popular thing, we are far more better equipped to form teams in India because of culture. Building team culture, a lot of people tell me, right? In United States, there are 5 species, broadly. A black American, a white American, somebody who is an Hispanic, somebody who has a Mongoloid feature everywhere, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, in one. And whatever is left out is often called as Indians or Pakis and Sri Lankans. That's the definition, broad definition of America. We have 26 languages, which is given by our constitution. And the way our political leaders go, there are 2 things they do. They make the super fast train stop from their constituency and ask for their language to get a national status, as if they're going to give their life. Right? So 26 will soon become 36. And you add regional dialects, that's diversity. I don't think no other country in the world, and I repeat this emphatic statement, is as diverse as India. No other country in the world. In terms of its quantity, in terms of diversity. Having said that, let me give you some fundamental statistics. And I looked at social anthropologists, psychologists. Fundamentally, if you look, there is a difference between a Western self versus a non-Western or primarily Asian self. I'm doing a super generalization, but that's what it is. Western self is far more egocentric than sociocentric of Indian self. Svidder and Bone, 1984, social anthropologist, great study. I think it still holds good. There's nothing right or wrong. The focus is on self versus focus is on the context. As we often say, high context culture. We all exist because our context exists. That's what matters to a software engineer when he leaves his job because his sister has to get married and he has to pay dowry. Very difficult for an American to understand this. Nothing right or wrong. That's the way it is. Because it's important. It's all about choice. It's all about what I think is important. The second, Dumont, psychologist, again a famous study, in 1985. Western concept of self as characterized by individualism. Individual is of paramount value versus non-Western concept of self as characterized by holism. Society, and when I talk about, I bring it a little lower level, family, community is of paramount value. That means I have more value. The focus is not only self, the focus is on people around. Stamson, 1988, again a psychologist. Self-content individualism versus the major characteristics of Western self versus ensembled individualism. We all adopt. That's the reason Indians are so good. Self-content individualism means what I inherit and what I grow with, what are my values, and that get manifested. And ensembled individualism is like a sponge I absorb. When I grow from my teacher, from my friend, from my leader, from the society I live, right? And that's get preferred in terms of food. If you go to Calcutta, there is this place called Calcutta Coffee House, where all the intellectuals go. And the most favorite dish is something which I took one of my Tamil Iyengar friend, and he was shocked. Because the most popular dish over there is mutton dosa. He almost fell from chair. Right? Do you get? A very silly example, but that's, I think, the best example of what I call it, ensembled individualism. I can go on and on. I have found out at least there are 38 studies. Anybody is interested, I can give you. Which says there is a fundamental difference between Western self and non-Western self. And therefore what it works at Cupertino may or may not work in Basavangudi. Okay. So, the last one, generating great and holistic ideas. Again, advantage India. I'll talk about one study. And this was done by two Indian researchers from Harvard. And very interestingly, they were studying semiconductor industry in Taiwan. And they stumbled upon this behavior. And they published this famous paper in Journal of Management, Journal of Academy of Management. And they talk about two things. They said there are two cultures. They said Asian culture, again, of course, in India, there is a study that we are very good at associative thinking versus Western mind, which is very strong on abstract thinking. And what is the difference? Difference is very simple. In associative culture, people tend to form association between events which may not have a logical basis. Whereas in abstractive cultures, cause-effect relationships are more rationally based. And if you have worked in multinational companies and worked with your American bosses, I guarantee you have seen this number of times. If I have to make this presentation to predominantly American audience, I will not make that. They'll get lost. And if I do that with you, you will say, "Ye kisko laya? Savare savare." Nothing right or wrong. We can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. That's what a social anthropologist call it, high context culture. Our ability to move from one thing to the other thing, which probably has no association. but we can connect the dots. That's what is culture. In abstract culture, 2.2 can only be 4. It cannot be in 3.9, it cannot be 4.1. And that's what KD and Bhagat found out, and they said, and there was further work by Professor Kanungo, who did work from McGill University. Developing countries, including India, as being relatively low on abstractive thinking and relatively high on associative thinking. And the brain research will tell you, this new branch of science, which I got interested at least 5 years back, because it gives me a lot of ammunitions to convince my engineering friends, who are basically left brain, to tell what I am telling has scientific basis. The subject is called social neurology. And it very clearly says that. Again, nothing right or wrong, as I said, because gone are the days where, we have said this is right, this is wrong. And I primarily believe in India, the biggest problem with the education system is, our education system is based on these assumptions of something permanently right, permanently wrong. But as we all know, there are lots of grays when you get into. And so we find it difficult to get into, because our education system prepares this is right, this is wrong. This is left, this is right. This is black, this is white. And then when we come into corporate, we start realizing there are lots of grays. But interestingly, Indians are pretty well known. And I often say that it's not by chance. 35% of Harvard faculty today are of Indian origin. I don't believe it's by chance, because they have this ability to deal with ambiguity. This is because associative thinking comes from right brain thinking, which is apparently logic says, don't do it, don't do it. You'll read this fascinating book by Daniel Pink and you'll get it. Right? So, again, advantage India. So, what are you doing? What are you doing about these great resources? So, lastly, what I want to tell is, this is a beautiful book, and I asked every project manager to read this book. This is just released, What the CEO Really Wants from You. R. Gopalakrishnan. I still remember when he was in Bangalore, and I was the president of National HRD Network, he gave this speech because he was leaving, his age-old company of levers and joining the Tatas. And the last lecture, he gave it in Bangalore. One of my best authors. He's written books like, the earlier book was Bonsai Managers. Please read it. And the latest book is What the CEO Really Wants from You. And I found the most apt. And I'm a great believer of GE philosophy. And therefore, rightfully, you can't accuse me of plagiarism. But I always believe if you see something good, right, you share. And my father used to tell, I'm a Brahmin by birth. He said the only thing Brahmins do is share knowledge. So I'm sharing knowledge with you. And I found it fascinating. This book is just released 2 weeks back. What the CEO Really Wants from You. And he says how to build great teams that generate great ideas. He says, like any management theory, it's 4 A's. He says, and that's I found so true for IT, accomplishment. IT, you can't become a leader until and unless you have accomplishments. Wherever you are. Because by and large, the North American did a great thing in India. And I still believe very strongly about it. IT industry is the only industry in India which is built on meritocracy. From the beginning. Accomplishment. So therefore, when you build a team and when you want to build a team, you must have accomplishment. Without that, you can't become leader. Neither you can be a social entrepreneur, like what you are seeing in today's, or as one of my friends says, Sasu entrepreneur. So India is full of social or Sasu entrepreneurs. You have to show accomplishment. People like you and me, right? Who go to schools to get educated with the hard-earned money by our parents. So accomplishment. The second A is called affability. Are you approachable? Are you empathetic to your people? Or you sit in a room. I remember many years back, I was doing a team building session. So one of the very powerful, very successful boss said, I have kept my doors open. The most timid, frail-looking guy stood up and said, "But sir, you never told us to come in." Right? So, affability. The third is advocacy. If you want to create teams, if you want to create ideas, it's always, you must have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, you are not a leader. And that you should strongly advocate what you believe in, because advocacy is just not saying it like our political leaders. And that's why we have a crisis of governance in this country, because there is no advocacy. Advocacy comes from commitment, personal commitment. I and you know, if we stand for something that it should come from within. So advocacy. You must have advocacy. And the last, this is the toughest inflection point I have personally found. And if you ask me, with my 2 decades of experience, I've seen leaders where people take a lot of time to get into this, is authenticity. And that's what, to my belief, the whole world is looking up to. And I'm sure you will agree, if you have to ask you one quality that you want to see in your leader, that should be authenticity. So please follow this. Accomplishment, affability, advocacy, and authenticity. He has taken, but when I was reading the book, I said, obviously this is not complete, because people will ask, what do you do? Okay, so here I am. So Mahesh has asked me, great ideas versus great teams. I'm sorry, because I'm changing the proposition. I believe it's general great ideas from great teams that you need to be successful in knowledge economy. It's not either or. I told you, again, it's a time in knowledge economy, you have to have great idea which comes out of left and right brain. And therefore, the chances are that you get them from great teams, because you have people who are very strong left brainers and who are strong right brainers. And you might have some of the future CEOs, who knows? Or you might be one of those future CEOs who can use the left and right brain. I have lots of regards for those people, and I've seen people done having it. So you create this. That will continue to produce great ideas, which are breakthrough ideas in knowledge economy. And I can't talk about project management to a predominantly IT crowd. This book I have read at least 6 times. And again, I tell you, Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister, 1994, first it got published. As I was sharing with my colleague Shobit, this book was given to me by my boss, Rajiv Modi of Sasken. He said, read this book. You want to understand IT. And I quote, Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister said, if you find yourself concentrating on the technology rather than sociology, you are like the valuable character. You know, it's a drama in 20th century America, they used to perform like a folk drama, right? Vaudeville dramas. Character who loses his keys on the dark street and looks for them on that distant street, because as he explains, the light is better there. Thank you very much for a patient listening. So I need to get out of this. I need to take my laptop. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pallab Bandyopadhyay. The audience, if you have any questions, we can have 2 to 3 minutes of time for question and answer. Ma'am, yeah. Mahesh, can you pass on the mic, please?
Check.
Good morning. I'm Priya from Bosch. I have a very simple question. Most of the examples, most of the quotations, whatever you have presented today, are, as I noticed, 88, 90s, and so on. When we attend behavioral trainings and things like that, we are constantly told there's a Gen X, there's a Gen Y, the rules are different, you have to adapt as project managers, so probably what your bosses, how your bosses dealt with you, you cannot deal with your team members. So do you think some of the points that you mentioned today, especially about individualism and the socio-centric things, are they still applicable in the Indian context today?
Good question. Okay, I'll give you some profound answers. Unfortunately, in India, the field of research in behavioral science is at least 10 years behind the schedule. And I can tell you, I'm pretty, unlike most of the working managers, unfortunately, I have a tag of academic. A lot of people call me professor. That's my nickname in the industry. But leave that aside. We have not done much work. The latest, only one theory in India perhaps has been done by Pradeep Khandwala, the ex-director of IIM. And again, if you get time, read this book called Trishanku Complex. We have not done much work, and that's my thing, what is in Indian. And I still don't believe in Gen Y, Gen X behaviors, because which is imported from North America. I'll give you a simple thing why it is workable. In North America today, 50% of the people come from single parent family. What is the percentage in India? Still? So, my point is affability or society or the family is, I think, very interesting, but what are the things, what is happening in Indian context? I personally believe that people are going through a huge level of contradiction. Like this country, 370 million people, which you and I can speak English, disposable income, have access to everything, and every multinational worth, name it, wants to reach us. Another 370 million doesn't have an access to basic things in life, right? How do you deal? Xenex, for example, in India, if you want to see my way of looking at it, don't go by the baby boomers. It doesn't work in India. No way. I'll tell you one thing, how it works. When I used to go, of course, in late 90s, when I worked for Sasken, my job was to go every quarter to visit Silicon Valley. And I had a very specific job as an HR head of the company, to convince people in the valley to come back to work in India. I must have spoken to 200 people. Every quarter I used to go. And I can tell you a statistics, I was successful in getting about 50 plus people to come back, talking after 200 people. And I'll give you again a statistics because you asked me a question on research, I'll tell you. And guess what was the reason why they wanted to come back? What is that social life? Close.
Children.
What is the second one? The children. And specifically when they're girl child, they attain puberty. Suddenly they realize their $200,000 job, 2 swimming pool, 1 house in Cupertino, and the great life he has nothing compared to what he can give to his daughter at backwards of Vasavangudi. Sorry, I live in very close to Vasavangudi, so it's coming again and again. Don't take it in. Otherwise, I live in Jayanagar. It's very close to my heart. Anyway, so you get my point. So in spite of people who have been living 20 years, so culture is very strong. So coming back to a long answer to your short question, some of these things, is very, very common. It doesn't change for over a period. Even if you live 200 years, right? Culture change really happens in, so 15 years, 20 years, being educated in US, lived in US, still that's what is, because that's what you grew up. So you cannot do anything when we talk about building team, making relationship, right? Now, the question is, what I personally feel, and that's possibly you should look forward to, is what are the kind of contradictions these days youngsters are facing? Very common. In the same family, if you are a girl child, and if you do MBA, you should come back at 8. If you have a brother doing the MBA in same institute, he can come back at 10. Second thing you look at, what is the parent's profile? I don't believe, I was actually working for sometimes, for some reasons, we could not complete with Vasanthi Srinivasan. Many of you know she teaches OB in Bangalore, and she kind of resonated with my idea. If you want to study Indian people, see their professions of their parents. And you will see most of the people who are there now, their parents, many of them, teaching is a profession. Mother would get into teaching. You don't have to do a social science researcher to do that, because that is the safest profession India would have. Now I will see, and I'm predicting today, you will soon get another 5 years from a student, and I have already started doing that, going to schools. Those who are going to come, probably I'll not head HR though in these days, but those are the people who are coming, their parents are professionals. They have mothers who work in IT companies. I need to see what is because I strongly believe in India, the parents have the most profound influence on what you become. Most of the cases. Exceptions are there, but exception always proves the law. But I think we need to do research in terms of finding out how we cope up with these contradictions, which an American kid doesn't have to do. Because they are born in a very context which is similar. But in India, on the advent of globalization, the explosion, and at the same time, the family values. How do I cope up? And that possibly will give up some clues. But unfortunately, not much research is being done. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Praveen from SunGuard. When we are talking about building high-performance teams, the general problem managers face is some people in the team are highly motivated, they do everything untold, and the other half, they need supervision, direction, they are just not up to the mark. Managers generally tend to shrug it off saying, they are not up to the mark, we can't do anything with them. So in this context, what are your experiences in dealing with these situations?
Good question. I'll give you an answer, not back my authentic research, because whatever I say, I always come out with research, but this is my intuition. Hopefully someday somebody will do research. The problem with high performance team, and I also do and go through this, in Indian context is not about high performance, but about low performance. We do not communicate consequences of low performance in high performing culture. How many of you, please raise your hands, you are comfortable laying off people? I have laid off more than 1,000 people, so a lot of, has credited in my account. Maybe after I'll get it when I go to the God. I've done, because that's my job. How many of you are comfortable? Honestly, raise your hands. Good to see some hands. But predominantly, you get your answer, right? Now, it is none of your fault. I will give you my hypothesis, and that's the problem. In a high-performance culture, you have to prepare people for getting ready for non-performance. And therefore, also accept the fact that the performers are entitled for rewards. I'll give you 2 minutes I'll take, because otherwise I think getting into somebody's time, but 2 research. The first one is done by Mercer across the world. Mercer said predominantly there are 3 cultures when you give reward. In American culture is primarily what they call it 3P formula, performance. Or in America, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what is your educational qualification, it doesn't matter where you come from, all it matters is performance. And in that society, everybody is fairly comfortable if I know that maybe Mahesh is my colleague, and Mahesh has got 20% increase because he's a better performer than me. And as long as you convince me, I will do that. Whereas you look at in India, I always call it with one renad in Indian IT industry. Uski kameez mere kameez se safed kyun? Why is his shirt brighter than mine? Every discussion starts from not me, but somebody else, but Mahesh. You get this? The second one is called, in European, it is called more or less reward. Reward center around position.